right, thank you, Candace. So our speaker today is the Assistant Director of Student Athlete Development at the University of Tennessee, former member of the Lady Vol softball team. Caitlin now supports the growth and success of Tennessee varsity student athletes through leadership training, career development, and holistic programming. She's a founding member of the Voleaders Academy, a leadership development program that empowers student athletes to use their platform in sport to create positive social change. Caitlin holds both a bachelor's and a master's degree from UT, and outside of her professional work, she's an avid traveler, freelance photographer, and she loves capturing the beauty of the Smoky Mountains. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our speaker, Caitlin Ryan.
Hi, how's everyone doing today? Thanks for having me. I will preface this by saying I, in my professional life, am a professor as well, and so I am used to moving around a lot when I speak, so this will be interesting to stay here square at this podium. But I'm excited to be here. I don't get a lot of opportunities to get out in the community to talk about what we do at Tennessee. That's not necessarily athletic based. Everything that I do is kind of professional and personal development for our student athletes. And so it's an exciting opportunity to come and just share a little bit about what that looks like in our ever-changing world right now. I'm sure for those of you who are UT fans or college sport fans, there's a lot going on in the last few years that has really changed the game. And so for us, it's created some fun challenges to figure out how to continue to serve these student athletes in the best way possible. So when you think of Tennessee athletics, see if this works, you probably think of things like this, right? There's a lot of excellence in this. We had a phenomenal swimmer the last few years, Jordan Crooks, still holds a world record in the 50 and won 3 national championships in individual events last year. So you probably think of just a lot of excellence, right, like in sport. You probably don't think of things like this. Setting GPA records. Last year, I think we served 2,500 hours in the community. Student athletes, getting 4.0 GPAs. This photo down here in the corner, we had 4 student athletes last year win the Torchbearer Award, which is the highest honor given to undergrads at the University of Tennessee. That has nothing to do with their athletic performance. You probably recognize Jemai Mashak in the middle if you're a basketball fan, and if you're aware of any of his philanthropic passions. Last year he did a lot with Second Harvest, fed a lot of folks in our community. That's the kind of stuff that gets rewarded with the Torchbearer Award, but that's something that the Chancellor gives out at her honors and awards banquet in the spring. We had 4 student athletes win that award last spring, which is an incredible number for us. And so this is the kind of stuff that I do, right? So you have a whole team of people who help our student athletes be the most incredible athletes they can possibly be, win all the championships, be All-Americans, go on to be pro, all those fun things. And then there's a whole other team of people behind the scenes who are helping those folks develop as people and as future professionals, because the reality is the vast majority of these student athletes are not going to be pro, right? Or they may be pro, some of them for a very short period of time. Life is really long. What are we doing to help you develop as a person, as a professional, and how to help those other dreams come true? So I work at a place called the Thornton Center. If you've been to UT and you've been by the track, you've been across from the Rock, you've seen this building. It's kind of an odd-shaped building. That's where I work. That's kind of like what the inside looks like. It's a beautiful space. This is our mission, and you're probably thinking, okay, that's a lot of fancy words. What does that mean? What do you actually do in that place? This is the kind of stuff that we oversee. You'll see Tennessee Tailored down here in the corner. Our office is the Thornton Center. Tennessee Tailored is our program. And so this idea is that all of our students come into our care, and as they come in, they're all at a different place professionally, academically, and what they need is different. And so we take a tailored approach to every student. And that looks different, especially with transfer portal right now. We have a lot of students coming under our care who have been in college before. They've been at 1 or 2 other universities, and so they may be at a very different place than an incoming freshman student athlete. A lot of our student athletes are first gen, and so they're the first person in their family to ever go to college. And so when you don't have anyone ahead of you to kind of help you understand what to expect, a lot of times coming into a university setting is very much like a culture shock. And so we help kind of through that transition. I teach a transition course for first-time freshmen, and we do everything from how do you work all the systems on campus? How do you write an email to a professor? To how do you get a resume together? What do you want to be when you grow up? What's your major? How do we make that kind of connect in a lot of those pieces? And so we have 3 different divisions: academic services, student services, and student athlete development. I'm in student athlete development. I think it's the more fun area personally. You'll see the academic side is and student services is very serious. It can be fun. But those are more of the folks who are making sure that our students are doing what they need to do in the classrooms. They can be eligible to actually compete. You can see them on the field on Saturdays and Sundays, and they're the ones communicating with professors when our teams are traveling, helping them register for classes, pick majors, all that fun stuff. Student services folks, that's a lot of our tutoring services, learning specialists, mentoring, anyone who has any individual kind of specific needs in that space. Some of our student athletes come in and they're very, very high achieving and they're ready to be in college, and then we have some who just aren't quite there yet and they have some deficiencies in certain areas, and so that's what our student services group is for, is to kind of help them catch up in some of those spaces. And then student athlete development, again, I think it's the fun area. We kind of operate in these 4 spaces. A lot of career and professional development prep. Obviously, like I said, most of our student athletes, they're not going to be professional athletes, and so we've got to figure out, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? When you graduate at 22, what's that going to look like? So we have a lot of different programming, some different interactive pieces there. We do a lot of one-on-one sessions. We do some big sessions also. Maybe we do a career tour now, so we take student athletes like to Atlanta, to Nashville, meet with employers, kind of help them learn how to network, do some of those fun things. I operate really heavily in the leadership development space. I'm going to talk probably the back half of my presentation about Voleaders. That's my baby. But we have a leadership development program that I teach within that's called Voleaders. And we do a lot of kind of different pieces to help develop those students as future leaders for the rest of their lives. Personal enhancement, this is honestly in last years has very much been financial literacy heavy. If you're aware of NIL, rev share, all those kind of fun pieces, a lot of our students are coming into money that they've never had before, and they don't necessarily know what to do with. And so we have very much ramped up financial literacy training. We have a group who comes in who does group sessions and individual sessions to help our students kind of recognize, now that you have these funds, what do you do with that to make sure that you're good from a tax perspective? What are we doing from an investment perspective? Even like putting it in the bank, like how should we breaking that up in different accounts and such? So a lot of care has gone into making sure that there's education and groundwork in that space. Because for a lot of these students, they have an opportunity to make money right now from the NIL space and through RevShare, and they may not necessarily go pro. And so they're making more money now than they might make in their first job, right? And so we do a lot of education around, the importance of saving that money and not necessarily buying all the fun, shiny things that they probably want to buy. And then we do a lot of community engagement. We do individual opportunities for our students, and then we do a lot of team-based service. We partner a lot with Knox County schools. We do a lot within, our students really like kids, and so we do a lot within classrooms, hospital visits, whatever kind of project people come to us with. But we try to do team-based service every semester with every team at least once, and then we do a lot of individual things as well. So these are all things that are offered for our students, and it's my job to help them realize the benefit of all of these things and to take advantage of those pieces. On top of, the 30 hours a week that they're also training and playing their sport and traveling, and then being in the classroom. And so their lives are pretty busy. And so it's our job to kind of help them understand the benefit of being involved in these spaces. So within leadership development, we have something called Voleaders Academy. Is anyone familiar with this? Maybe? Okay, yeah, I know you are. Okay, so fun, I get to teach you about this. So this is my baby, the Voleaders Academy. Voleaders is a year-long intensive leadership development program for student athletes. It's a very prestigious honor at this point. We started this program in 2015, so this is our 10-year anniversary. And so we started, we had 13 student athletes go through the program. We're now at a clip where we have about 50 a year who go through. And so our coaches nominate folks on their team who they think are going to be like the emerging leaders in their space and who's going to have an influence on their team and they get kind of selected and put into our program. And so our program has 4 different components. We start with a retreat, which is actually this Sunday, so have all of our new folks coming in this Sunday. The 2 big components of the program, we have a fall class and a spring class. And so this program is curriculum based, and so it's protected times, because when you try to ask student athletes to come and do extra things, oftentimes ask them to come in at night and do things on a continual basis, they just don't have time for it. So we built it into a class. They get actual credit for this. They get a leadership minor at the end of our program, so they get some academic kind of pieces to it as well. But it's basically just teaching them how to be the best leader that's authentic to them. We don't believe that leadership is the same for everyone. I think sport oftentimes tells you that the only people who can be leaders are the ones who are the oldest, the ones who score all the points, the ones that the coach says is the leader, the one who's the loudest, the one who leads all of the, rah, rah, rah cheers before the game. We tell our students that leadership can be small acts every day that build up, right? I mean, maybe you are the person who is influencing everyone before the game and kind of giving that, let's go get them speech, or maybe you're the person who's pulling your teammates aside one-on-one and having those conversations. And so we go through a lot of curriculum-based stuff to help them figure out, what does leadership look like for you? How do you lead yourself first, and how do you lead others? The spring class is more where I teach, and I know it has a fancy name on there because that's what it has to be put into the timetable. It has to have a real name, but it's very much sport for development based. And so it's this idea that sport has power, and sport and physical activity connects people in a way that really little else does. Everyone loves sport. It's kind of a universal language. And so how can you use that? How can you use your platform right now as a student athlete to impact people's lives in a positive way? And we learn a lot about, you'll see the 4th component is we do an international service immersion trip. It's not so much in our country, but in a lot of countries, there are a lot of NGOs that use sport to enact change in their communities. And so they use sport as the vehicle to kind of get people to come, and then while they're there, they address whatever social issue might be kind of happening in that space, whether it's women's empowerment or youth development or poverty, food insecurity. A lot of times sport is kind of the thing that's advertised, and then once you're there, you can really get people involved in some of those practices. And so we learn all of that, and then we go to a country. We've been to, I think, 8 different countries at this point on a 12-day service immersion trip, and we serve with organizations who are using sport-based service in their communities. Our goal is not to go into, say Rwanda. We've been to Rwanda a few times, to Rwanda, and think that we're going to save anyone or change anyone's life. It's really to see the work that's going on in those spaces, and how can you, as a person, as an athlete, use your platform and use your influence to enact change in that way. So I thought it might be kind of interesting to give you a small glimpse into one of my foundational lessons. So when we talk about sport for development, this is called the human capital model, and ChatGPT made this for me. So that's what AI can do for you, I guess. But so yeah, we talk a lot about AI also in classroom now, and it's kind of our friend, but also not in an academic setting. But this is the human capital model, and so the idea is if physical activity and sport is the input there in the middle, you're going to get capital or gains in these 6 areas, right? And this doesn't just apply to our college athletes right now. This is just in general in life, right? And so an example would be if you stay physically fit or physically active, when you are 60, 70, 80 years old, there's going to be some physical gains in that way, right? We know, just research shows us that you're going to be more healthy when it comes to heart health. You are less likely to have injuries when you can touch your toes, and you can be flexible, and all those. There's a lot of physical benefits from being involved in physical activity or sport. We think about it from a social aspect. We're here on a golf course, right? Golf is a game that people can play for a very, very long time, right? It's not as hard on your body as some other things. There's a very social aspect to that, right? So maybe when you're older, that's where you get some of those social relationships filled. You go and you play with your friends and you meet people through sport, right? Same with emotional capital. We all know how we feel better. Sometimes if we're stressed, we're depressed, there's a lot going on in our lives. We go for a walk, we get outside, like we feel better, right? There's some endorphins and some dopamine that comes from that. And so it's this idea that this is why sport has power, right? Why sport and physical activity have power is because if that's the input, you see gains in all these areas, and that can be for your whole life, right? It doesn't have to just be now while you're in college. So I tell our students, but for a lot of them, sport was the vehicle that got them to school. That's the reason why they're here. That's the reason why they're getting a degree. So there's some of that like intellectual capital for them. But this is true like for life. And so when you think about like people, all the gains that you get from sport, and then also knowing that sport is a universal language. Everyone speaks sport. You can go to South Africa and you can throw a soccer ball out on a field, and whether it's me or some kid who lives in Johannesburg, we can play together, right? We may not speak the same language, but we can play together. So it's the kind of a universal connector in that sense. And so this is kind of where we start when I start to talk about with our students why sport is powerful, and how them right now as an athlete, they may feel like a small cog in like a big machine, but they have the power to influence people in a positive way. And what do you want to do with that, right? Like, how do you want to use that for the rest of your life? How do you want to establish yourself as a leader now so that when you are 40, 50, 60 years old, you can lead your family, you can lead your community, you can lead in whatever way is authentic to you. And so we really start kind of on this baseline level with some of our conversations. This is a map. It's not updated, I realize this, of where we have been on our trips. This past summer, 2025, we went back to Brazil. It was our 10th anniversary, so our very first trip was to Brazil. So we went back this summer to work with some of the organizations that we partnered with previously. But other than that, these are all the spots that we have visited. We do have a location for next summer's trip. I'm not going to tell you because we haven't told the students yet. Not that I think you'll go tell any of them, but just in case. But so we go back sometimes to some countries. We have a partnership in Rwanda, so we go back to Rwanda every couple of years when we can. And other than that, we maybe revisit, but we oftentimes pick new locations. And so, again, this is usually about a 12-day trip that we kind of spend in country. This is some of, I think, our bragging points. Like I mentioned, when we started in 2015, we had 13 members. Now we're up to 50 or so. So we've got about 250 alums who've come through the program. You can see our numbers in terms of service hours, countries visited, organizations that we have partnered with. In 2023, we won the Model Practice Award from N4A, which is our governing body. It's one of the highest awards that you can get in like the student support service area. And so that's a big point of pride for us. And you'll see at the bottom, we get about 82 hours or so of intensive leadership training. That's from the classroom-based activities that we do. And so we see these students, you either see them Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So I see them twice a week for about 3 hours for the whole year. And so that's a lot of kind of intensive training for these students. And when you see that we have 250 alum, I think a lot of times when people think about projects like this, you think, oh, I'm sure it's like the walk-ons who are involved, or it's the players who maybe aren't like the highest, like achieving ones who coach things like has time to do things like this. And so I like to dispel that. These are some of our recent alums or former alums you might recognize. Top corner, we have Andrea Carter, Lady Vol basketball. If you watch ESPN or SEC, you probably see her all over the place these days. She's one of their talents. Grant Williams, down here in the corner, he went to Ecuador. He is now, I think, with the Hornets, I believe. And he's coming off injury. Everyone's favorite here, Dylan Sampson, in the middle. He came to South Africa and Botswana with us last summer, starting his NFL career this fall. Josh Palmer as well. I know he's with the Bills now. He came to Rwanda with us in 2019. Byron Young, who is with the Rams, right? Not the Chargers. I think he's with the Rams, LA Rams. He also was a Voleader, came with us 2022 to Rwanda. And so these are some of our folks, I think, who like you probably recognize, and some of our pros. Trey Smith, we all know Trey Smith. He was a Voleader as well. Alante Taylor, who's with the Saints. We have a pretty good history with some of our NFL football guys. So these are some faces you probably recognize. These are faces you probably don't recognize who've come through our program. Up there in the far corner, that's Spencer Cross. He was a golfer. He now plays on some tour. Golf is hard for me to like keep up with, but he is still playing. But what's cool about Spencer is that he started his own nonprofit, Smoky Mountain Junior Golf, and so it's out in Sevier County because that's where he was from originally. And so he has a nonprofit where he tries to get young kids involved in golf, and so he offers a lot of free access to youth in that area. There's a lot of youth development. He's got a partnership with a course where they are allowed to come and play for free. He helps them get clubs, gets lessons, those kinds of things. Maya Neal was a soccer player. She actually still plays pro as well, but she has an NGO, Your Foot, My Foot. And so she operates here in Knoxville, Chicago, and Liberia. She has a family connection in Liberia. And so her whole project, again, gets kids involved in the game of soccer, teaches them, gives them access to coaches, and everything's free, does a lot of development pieces there. And then her partnership in Liberia, she also has like a little bit of an arm in Rwanda. She does a big donation drive where she sends them gear as well, and then sends coaches also in to kind of help get people involved and teach them the sport. Callie Tucker here on the bottom, she is a recent grad of ours. She's actually still in grad school. She's getting her master's in public health, and she's going to med school next year, but she's currently in the Philippines. She went to the Philippines with us on our trip in 2023, and she went back to work with an organization, PADS. They do a lot of adaptive sport, and so she is working with their organization to do some grant writing. Sorry, I'm choking on myself. She is to kind of try to secure funding to help they're trying to found like a health clinic for folks with physical disabilities, and so she's working with them to kind of help do some of that grant writing. And then Mary Kate Brakefield here in the far corner, she was a swimmer. She launched a adaptive fashion line when she finished her career at Tennessee. That was kind of sprung on from her experiences with Voleaders. And so she now makes clothing for women, and all of it has like adaptive pieces. So if you have different physical disabilities, a lot of her clothing has like snaps rather than buttons, or zippers, and so it's a little bit easier if someone doesn't have mobility in their hands. And there's a lot of other adaptive pieces. I'm not gonna act like I can speak on all of it. But these are some folks that I think you don't know about from the athletic perspective who came through our program who are doing really cool things, I think, just out in the world. And our expectation is not that our students like give up their majors and the career paths that they want to do. Obviously, you can still have a lot of influence in people's lives. You don't necessarily have to found your own NGO, but I just think it's really cool to see that they use their experiences and their majors to kind of move forward and kind of just do whatever they could possibly do in the community in that sense. And I think this is just a really cool example of, I think, our student athletes in general. I think sometimes there is this idea that everyone who comes in as a student athlete is just there to like play their sport, and we cheer them on, we love them all, but they don't do anything outside of that, right? Like they're all in these like easy majors, they're not involved in anything because all they're doing is playing football and basketball and baseball. But that's not true. We have people who are all over the place, who are doctors, who are going to grad school, who have really, really hard majors. They're in architecture, they're in art, and so I think it's kind of cool to just see like all the differences across that population. And so again, this is my baby. I spent my whole career basically kind of like fostering this program, but it really builds into all of the work that we do within Tennessee Tailored to help support our student athletes. And I'm gonna leave you with this. That's my email. I wanted to put it up here in case you want it for any reason. We are always looking for people who want to connect with us, who potentially maybe have like opportunities for job shadowing or internships, or if you hire those kinds of folks in the summer. Those of you who are business owners, our student athletes are always looking for ways to get involved and get professional experience that maybe isn't like typical because their schedules are a little bit all over the place. And so if you're sitting here thinking like, oh, I sometimes like host interns in the summer, I'd love to hear from you because again, we're always looking to make as many partnerships as possible. If you have service opportunities as well, like again, we do a lot of service. So if you're thinking of something, you're involved in something and you'd like some student athletes to be involved, let me know. I also thought I would plug our Instagram. So if you want to follow along and see what we're doing, Vol_Tennessee Tailored. That's our main Instagram. And if you want to see what's going on with the Voleaders, that's our second one. Shameless plug. Just trying to get some more followers out there. But again, happy to connect with anyone who wants to connect on anything. And also happy to answer any questions if anyone wants to ask me questions. Yeah.
I have a question or a statement. I just got through reading a report this morning by the NC2A on gambling. 58% of athletes in Division 1, 2, and 3 are involved in gambling. 11% of athletes gamble on the sports that they participate in. And a prime example was shown this morning on the quarterback at Oklahoma now, who gambled while he was at Washington State for 2 years. What are y'all doing about the issue of gambling?
So we have a lot of gambling education. For those of you who don't know, that's not allowed. If you work in college athletics or you're a student athlete, because you have insider knowledge, you're not allowed to place bets on anything that there's NCAA sponsored championship with. So I think it even goes down to like bowling or those. We always get reminders around like fantasy football or March Madness brackets. We can fill those things out. We just can't join leagues or join anything where there's like monetary gain. What I will say at Tennessee, we do a lot of, so it's not necessarily my umbrella because that really comes from like more of the athletics compliance side. But I know that student athletes and staff go through multiple trainings a year on gambling. There's also a software that our university has that essentially, I don't know, I'm sure it costs a fortune, but all of our personal information, so like all of our names, email addresses, and phone numbers are entered into the software. And we work with this company, and they basically they are continually searching the internet and all of those online gambling sites, because people will get flagged when they are involved in it. Because I've had coworkers who've been flagged on things like that. So I can't speak to that report that you read or the validity of any of that. I just know that, at least from our side, we go through trainings, we have the software, and not to my knowledge, we haven't had any student athletes flagged in a long time. But again, it's not necessarily something that I have a ton of knowledge on. There you go.
I have a question. What positive changes have you seen within the portals?
Positive changes with the portal? No. So I think like we were talking about this earlier. I think when you think about NIL and rev share and portal, I think the combination of the three sometimes can present some challenges, but it also presents a lot of great opportunities. And I think the portal the whole idea was that it protects the student athletes. And so that they don't get trapped somewhere where they're not gonna have an opportunity, or they're with a coach who just doesn't wanna let them go. Now it does create, an opportunity to kind of be like sold in a sense, which isn't always my favorite. I think the hardest thing our coaches talk about is having to continually recruit, like even the players they still have. So I think that's hard, but I do think it is meant to protect student athletes, and it's meant to protect them from being stuck somewhere where, again, they don't have opportunity, or there's just some weird like political things going on. So I think from that perspective, it's positive. But I think it's the combination with NIL and rev share that creates a little bit of a struggle sometimes. Yeah.
So first and foremost, knowing some of the Lady Vols who have gone through Voleaders program, it's amazing job that you've come up with and instituted at the university.
Thank you.
Sticking with NIL, as I was just at a venue yesterday talking about obviously the ever-changing landscape of NIL. It changes, it seems like, the rule every day.
It does.
But what are you seeing with student athletes as they're getting NIL deals, the requirements to fulfill those deals, and I guess the opportunity from the coaches and the athletics department working with them to fulfill those duties? Because I know that it's been an ongoing issue, in particular at the University of Tennessee, but across all NCAA.
Oh yeah, it's everywhere. I will say, I mean, there have been changes recently to try to make it a little more uniform, to hold, I think the initial on the front end, there has to be clear expectations, and then there has to be someone to hold student athletes accountable to those pieces, obviously. And I know that there have been some legislation changes that I think will help that moving forward. Now, I don't know how long they'll last, because I feel like every time I turn around, they change NIL, requirements. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of mystery with NIL, in that we think that every student athlete is making like a ton of money. And the reality is that there really aren't that many who are making substantial money. The vast majority of our student athletes at most are getting like free gear. If you're a swimmer, a lot of times they're getting like maybe some free suits from someone. Or if you see someone who has a NIL deal, it may be that they're getting like free food from that organization. They're not all making tons of money. Now, we also know there are some who are making like substantial money in that sense. I think it's also a little hard. The NCAA makes it a little challenging, because there's only so much that we can do when it comes to like how much interference and how much guidance the athletic department can kind of, I guess, fit in there. And so I will say NIL is kind of like an ever-changing environment, and I think it's like a bunch of trial and error, to be honest. And it will continue to be that way until I think they find like the right solution for it. Yeah.
So talking about NIL, the football team, the baseball team, the softball team, and the basketball team, what percentage of the players, student athletes,
Ooh.
have an NIL contract on average, just to get a feel?
I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea, like the actual percentage. So I would say the vast majority of them have some kind of NIL deal. Now, again, some of them are making money, like actual money, and then there's some of them who are doing an NIL deal and they're just getting like a discount code for something, or they're getting a little bit of free merch. In a sense, you will have a few student athletes. We have some who just don't even mess with it. They say it's too much of a distraction. I don't want to be involved in it. But the sports you mentioned, I would say the vast majority of those athletes have some kind of deal. Now, those who have substantial deals, I'd say it's more like 15% or so.
Softball has less a percentage versus football or baseball or basketball?
I think women in general have less NIL than our men do. I think men's sports are more popular than women's sports. And I think there's some different opportunities for our women than there are for our men. I think the men are making more money. But I think, like, again, some of them have deals that we would consider small, but for them is like very exciting, because they love this clothing brand and now they get free clothes from them,
Well,
Okay, last question. Last question.
Our women here, we're unique. We had
Yeah.
the very first NIL collective for all women's sports. So our women with NIL are way better taken care of here than in any other university across the country. So
They are. It's the booster club.
So
Yeah.
the Lady Vol Booster Club serves all Lady Vol sports. So, but when you do it dollars to dollars, it's a completely different conversation.
But it's still a great opportunity for them to get marketing and get, some different connections and things. So I think it's, whatever value you attach to it as a person also.
One last question. Who has
Joey.
Thank you.
So speaking about money and everything here, when guys go pro, you see the big contracts they sign, but you don't really see what they're doing behind the scenes to help their communities. That's not really publicized. You talked a little bit here about some of the student athletes that, after they graduate, have started their own nonprofits and NGOs. What percentage of the people that have gone through the program have done that themselves, like, that we're not hearing about, that are still contributing to the community, that have gone on to actually do this as part of their routine now?
I'd say there, at least from the Voleaders perspective, a very large percentage, because I know I spoke about like the 4 on the slide who aren't really like super professional athletes, who have kind of started their own thing. But I just, like, Josh Palmer was on the slide before, and I just had a conversation with him earlier in the week because he just started his own nonprofit. And so I think for a lot of our guys who get into the NBA and the NFL, it takes them a little bit of time And then they have the ability to kind of start something from the ground up. Trey Smith, great example, does a ton of work. And I would say a lot of our even like current football guys, you just don't always see it. A lot of them are doing things in their hometown. Like Omari Thomas last year had a big program that he did back to school stuff for in his community in Memphis, him and Jabari Small, where they collected funds and backpacks and things for some of their underserved elementary schools. And so there's a lot of stories like that. And so I think for like we don't do a great job of getting that into the media all the time, or we do, it's just not what people want to hear about. But I'd say there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than really gets thrown out there, because it just isn't as flashy as winning an SEC championship or whatnot. And so that's something that we've been trying to do lately, is to like really kind of try to put like platform those things as much as we possibly can. But I think it'll always be a struggle, especially, we're on this, like, we want to be the best athletic department in the whole country. And so there's very much an emphasis right now on winning, which we have been winning. And so I think that now it kind of gives us an opportunity to maybe tell some of those human stories too.
Is there support provided for them if they want to pursue that?
Yeah, we offer a lot of support in that way. And then we have a really great partnership on campus. We have an entrepreneurial center that provides a lot of support for any of our student athletes who want to start businesses or want to start like nonprofit organizations. They provide a lot of support to help make those things happen. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.